version of Jordan Abrams. They claim she's just a cold-blooded killer. And yet, Jordan Abrams is the woman who put her life on the line for her country for 7 years. Jordan Abrams is the woman who suffered through the loss of her husband to cancer. Jordan Abrams is the woman who has lovingly raised 2 daughters. Do these 2 versions seem at all compatible? The answer, as you heard from her daughter Remy, is a resounding no. Remy's testimony gives us valuable insight into the character of Jordan. Her persistent emergency training reveals a deep love for her family. Additionally, as a direct eyewitness to the events of August 30th, she can tell us that Jordan was standing on the top step of her balcony that night. Jesse Ryan, the expert, agrees. Additionally, she refutes many points made by Singer. In the end, all signs point to a scared mother simply trying to defend her family. Would someone who planned out and premeditated a killing of some teenager have stood as far away as possible? Of course not. Only someone who felt the need to protect. The prosecution told you today that her use of a handgun, not her taser, is indication that she meant to kill. But then, you heard Detective Peeler say that Jordan Abrams only owned a sort of inferior one-shot taser. Would this have been useful against any intruder? Probably not. The Glock was the safest option. They will also tell you that because she could have identified Chris Pavano down there with his crazy hair, she should have known that he wasn't a threat. But you heard Lauren Lucas tell you how dark it was. You heard from him himself that she couldn't see a thing. Lauren Lucas couldn't even see for sure how Chris Pavano was holding that broomstick. So what else doesn't the prosecution want you to know? They don't want you to know about the little mix-up between Peeler and Singer. You heard today Peeler testified that he was the first one on the scene, arriving at 9:50. But then, you heard Singer testify he arrived later, at 9:45. How is this possible? It just can't be. If they're screwing this part up, what else isn't right? Additionally, you heard Detective Singer say at 9:30, before he even arrived, he knew it was a crime scene. How is this possible? Detective Peeler claims that all the information he had was that a simple medical alert button has been pressed. Detective Singer clearly refutes this. What more aren't they telling us? Today, their carelessness threatens to put a woman in jail just for protecting her family. You have heard all the evidence. You can decide. Have they lifted the burden of proof? Absolutely not. They haven't even budged it. Jordan Abrams is a decorated military hero. She's a loving single mother. But a murderer? Absolutely not. Thank you, Your Honor.
Counsel?
May I proceed, Your Honor? May it please the Court, Your Honor, Counsel, and you, members of the jury. On behalf of myself and the entire prosecution, we would like to thank you for your time and attentiveness in today's case. Before we proceed, the prosecution would like to offer our deepest condolences to the Pavano family, as their son was wrongfully taken from them by the actions of Ms. Jordan Abrams on August 30th, 2013. What happened that night? Well, Ms. Jordan Abrams heard some noise downstairs, and so she got up and grabbed her Glock 17, a lethal handgun. She chose not to take her taser, a non-lethal weapon. And after walking back and forth across the hallway, checking on her kids and taking up several seconds, she sized up her shot. She looked at Chris Pavano when he was several feet away from her mother and fired without hesitation. She didn't fire a warning shot first. She didn't tell those 4 intruders to freeze. Today she's being charged with murder, along with 4 other charges. In order for her to be found guilty of murder, the prosecution must prove, one, that she caused the death of Chris Bavano. That's not in dispute today. We know that she was the shooter on August 30th. What is in dispute is the second element, that she knowingly and willingly killed Chris Bavano. But by the defense today, saying that her actions were justified, they're admitting that she did in fact murder Chris Bavano, but saying there were extenuating circumstances. The defense is claiming that she fell under the New Jersey justification of the use of force clause. That clause states that the use of deadly force is justified if, one, the intruders were unlawfully in the house. Again, that fact is not in dispute today. We all know that Lauren Lucas and Chris Bavano and the other two intruders should not have been there. What is in dispute is whether or not that use of force was immediately necessary. Jordan Abrams claims that there were threats being made downstairs. But not once today, on this stand, did Jordan Abrams say she watched her mother being beaten with this broomstick. Not once did she say she heard, "I'm going to hit you, I'm going to hurt you, I'm going to kill you." There were no threats made to her mother. There were no threats made to her. There were no threats made to her kids. Not a single witness has taken this stand under oath and said there were threats made that night. Jordan Abrams had no need to use deadly force. She had no justification to fatally shoot Chris Bavano. She also asserted on that very stand she didn't have much time that night. You heard all about what she did before she even looked downstairs. First thing she did was get up and grab her Glock. As she said, 2 or 3 seconds. Then she walked all the way to one end of the hallway, opened the door, and physically saw that Remy Abrams was sound asleep, and went all the way across to the other end of the hallway and did the same with Jada. She herself said that took more than several seconds. She walked back to the center of that hallway, which again she herself said it took 1 or 2 seconds. And she descended those stairs. She went right into the middle, where she could clearly see Chris Bavano. How do we know she could see him and distinguish him? One, you heard Remy Abrams today, the defendant's daughter, talk all about how she could distinguish Chris Bavano. She saw that green hair, the bushy green hair, unmistakable. But Ms. Jordan Abrams says that there wasn't enough light in the home. Just a few minutes later, when she went to go check on her kids for a separate noise that she heard, she said she was able to distinguish that her mother was downstairs when she was on the top of the steps. And at that time, the only light in that house was coming from the moon. The chandelier wasn't on. Her mother's reading light wasn't on. She used the moon to tell that her mother was down there. And now, from the middle of the steps, she tried to tell you that she couldn't tell it was Chris Bavano. She said she didn't have enough time to turn on the lights. Had she had made the conscious decision to turn on those lights, she would have seen that it was Chris Bavano. That whole room would have been lit up by the bright chandelier. She would have known exactly who she was shooting. You heard today from 2 experts. Jesse Ryan took this stand for the defense, told you all about the massive information that she had for her investigation. She had not 1, not 2, but 3 affidavits at her disposal, one of which she didn't even fully use. But Detective Singer took that stand today and said he had 4 affidavits, which he used fully, as well as the police questionings, which he used fully, as well as the evidence he collected and the tests he himself performed. But Ms. Ryan is still contesting many of Detective Singer's points and conclusions. She still tried to say that Detective Singer had bad work. She still tried to say that Jordan Abrams fired from the top of those steps. She didn't even use Jordan Abrams' entire story when coming to that conclusion. She didn't use Remy Abrams' entire story, another eyewitness. She didn't use Lauren Lucas's full story. or the story at all. He was another eyewitness. Did you hear that she reached out to ask any questions to the other eyewitnesses, Dorian Campbell and Gray Michaels, the other two who had broken in that house? She didn't even want to know their story. She didn't care. She had it made up in her mind that Jordan Abrams was justified. She didn't want to look at any evidence that didn't support that claim. You also heard her talk about her reconstruction and all her experience in the field of crime scene reconstruction. This court doesn't even recognize her as an expert in that field. This court recognizes her in crime scene investigation.
A minute.
You heard from Detective Singer all about what he did at the scene that night. He gathered evidence. He memorialized it. He checked the entire scene. He got information from Detective Peeler. And he performed his own tests. Detective Peeler, you heard today on that stand, talk about what he did when he got at the scene. He did a pat down of Miss Jordan Abrams and heard her give her reason for shooting, that Chris Pavano and his gang were breaking into his house. She didn't mention threats. She didn't mention danger. She gave a reason which doesn't fit the New Jersey State Justification Clause. After today's case, we are confident you will find that Ms. Jordan Abrams doesn't meet that clause, that the defense has failed to meet their burden, which they took on by saying that Jordan Abrams was justified in her actions. They have failed to prove that she needed to use that deadly force. They have failed to show that there were any threats made that warranted it. Thank you.
Michelle.
Good job, guys.
What did I do?